As a beginner, you probably learnt at one location, picking just the ideal conditions to allow you to learn in the safest and easiest way possible. But now your confidence and skill has increased, and you want to be on the water whenever and wherever possible. You may then find that your newfound confidence and skills gets knocked back when presented with unfamiliar situations. So in this chapter, we're going to build on what you already know, showing you how you can easily adapt, and along the way teach you a few new techniques that may be of help. We'll start with some simple tips and techniques that will help you with your riding in lighter winds. Then we'll look at stronger winds and refine your technique to survive when you're overpowered. Finally, we'll consider the initially daunting task of getting out through waves. Strong winds can paint over the cracks in your less than perfect technique, whereas in lighter winds, all these imperfections become apparent. Therefore, honing your light wind skills will have an impact on your kiting in more favourable conditions. For some people, just getting going in lighter winds can be a challenge. For others, you may not struggle to get going, but once you do get the board moving, the kite seems to generate lots of power and you're cruising nicely, but you struggle to hold your ground or ride upwind. We'll focus on two important areas. Firstly, some theory on how your kite works in these lighter airs and affects your ability to stay upwind. Then we'll give you insight into how you should adapt your technique. A common light wind situation is finding that you have to work to get going, but once you're riding, you actually feel quite powered and you're edging hard and riding close to the wind. But when you turn around, you realise you're actually heading downwind or only just able to hold your ground. So you can feel the power in the kite, so why can't you cruise upwind? It's more than likely due to apparent wind. The true wind is what you feel when you are stationary. When you are moving, either kite surfing or in any other way, then you will create a headwind, and this is equal to your forward speed. The apparent wind is what you feel when travelling at speed, and it's a combination of the true wind and the headwind. But you should be aware that as your forward speed increases, the apparent wind increases too, and its angle will move closer to the headwind. This means that the apparent wind is what your kite experiences and can be more than the true wind, hence why you feel more powered. But crucially, the changing angle of the apparent wind means that your board and kite need to bear off so that you don't stall. This is why in light winds, if you want to head upwind, it's better to go slightly slower, because the direction of the apparent wind will be closer to the true wind, so you can point higher, possibly helped by a bigger board or kite. In strong winds, the true wind is far more dominant, so you notice the effects of apparent wind far less. When the wind is light, or you're generally underpowered, you need to concentrate more attentively on your technique. Small changes to your weight distribution and bar movements can make all the difference between cruising comfortably or wallowing miserably. You'll find it's a subtle balancing act between using just enough kite movement to generate just enough power to just balance your body weight, whilst keeping your body taut and alert to keep the board trimmed exactly the way it needs to be. But there is one vital tip that you need to focus on throughout and applies to everything you do. You need to get the weight off the board. This will stop it sinking, it'll plane easier, and you'll have more control over the direction you want to go. The aim is therefore to allow the kite to take as much weight as possible. How we achieve this depends on what you're doing: getting going, riding along, or changing direction. Initially, it's obviously all about the kite. You need that big surge of power, more than ever, to get you out of the water and the board unsticking from the water and racing forwards. Start with large movements to get you going, but aim to make these smaller and smaller as you pick up speed. You want just enough power from the kite to balance your body weight. Too much power will just pull you downwind. You also need to be thinking ahead, as your kite is going to turn slower than normal. So anticipate the next turn in advance, so you can use that forward speed of the kite to keep it moving throughout the turn, which is particularly bad at the bottom of the turn, when more weight will suddenly end up over the board. When we look at the board and our legs, there is two areas to consider. Firstly, you want to ensure you have lots of weight over your front foot. This helps to keep the board flat in the water so that it can accelerate forwards. Then we come back to our overall goal, getting weight off the board. In the beginner DVD, we always stress that you must point the board downwind and pick up speed before slowly starting to edge upwind. But in lighter winds, we have to get our weight off the board as soon as possible. And we can't do this effectively if we're standing over the board riding downwind. So as soon as you have any speed, you need to get your shoulders back, hips forward, and start careful hillside edging of the board. Get your weight hanging off the kite. Your legs start slightly bent to roll over any chop and coax the board along in this crucial early stage. So you've got out of the water and started moving, but now we want to keep you moving and ideally staying upwind. Let's look at the kite first. Though you might think the more power the better, so you continue with large sweeping movements of the kite. But this positions the kite further back in the power zone, ultimately pulling you downwind. We want to use the minimum amount of large sweeps of the kite, just enough to get us up and planing. Once moving, we want small, gentle movements of the kite, not too high in the power zone and not too low. This allows the kite to stay as close to the edge of the wind window as possible. In turn, this allows you to maintain a constant stance and pressure on the board's edge, all resulting in a constant course and aiding in your ability to ride closer to the wind. Keep the kite sheeted in, both to give you power, but also so that you can keep your shoulders as far back as possible. Your stance is crucial and noticeably different from your stance in moderate or strong winds. The key differences: shoulders are pushed right back and held there in light winds. Hips are forced forwards. Legs are nearly straight. The whole body is long and straight, tense and held in position. Why? Well, in strong winds we want as much weight as possible over the hillside edge to help control the board. Whilst in light winds, this stance results in the majority of the weight from the waist up hanging off the harness. In strong winds, we kill any excess power from the kite by changing the trim of the board, pushing hard on the back foot, burying the tail of the board, absorbing power and forcing the kite to the front of the window. In light winds, we want to utilise every ounce of power to drive the board forwards, so we don't want any erratic movements of the board. Very little weight is channeled down through your legs, so they are kept straight and locked. This maintains a constant amount of hillside edging and thus a constant direction. Getting the maximum out of riding in light winds is not about relaxing and cruising. You'll simply ride off downwind. You need to concentrate on the position of every part of your body and ensure all adjustments are small and gradual. When it comes to changing direction, it's easy to lose all your momentum and fall in, or lose large amounts of ground carving downwind. If you are keen to stay upwind, then the sliding turn is your best option. Again, it's important to keep your weight against the kite throughout, paying particular attention during the middle part, when you stop and your kite is typically overhead and you want to keep your weight off the board. You need to lean back as much as you possibly can, so all your weight is outboard, hanging off the kite. You may come close to falling in backwards or slightly touch the water with your back, but the correct timing with an aggressive first sweep of your kite in the new direction will save you and send you in that new direction. Be gentle with your carve entering the turn, but during the middle and end, you can edge aggressively to counter a surge of power from the kite as it goes deep into the power zone. This power will serve you well, driving you forwards and immediately upwind, ready for more gentle kite movements and your straight, locked out stance. In light winds, any tricks will lose you ground downwind. Jumps, carving turns, riding toe side will always mean you're left with a few runs to get back to where you started, or a short walk. But obviously, the temptation is often too great to overcome. So now you've improved your technique and are making the most of light winds. But the other end of the wind scale can be equally as frustrating. Strong winds offer the opportunity for high adrenaline kite surfing, fast speeds and huge jumps. Compared to light winds, there is far fewer areas to cover, but follow these fundamental key points to get you out and making the most of some of the most fun conditions in kite surfing. First off, ride slow. In strong winds, it's very easy to pick up loads of speed and start losing control. So your aim should be to try and ride slower than you can obviously go in this strength of wind. When riding at a slower speed, you can still harness the power of the kite to quickly accelerate just when you need to, say before launching into a huge jump. So how do we maintain this controlled speed and not fly off downwind? If the kite is higher in the window, it will try to pull you upwards, off your edge, so there'll be very little you can do to resist any gusts that pull hard. Keep the kite low. This way it will be pulling you sideways, against the edge of the board, something you can control by edging hard. Even in the biggest gusts, you'll be able to resist the pull by edging harder and harder. You'll also find that you can force the kite right to the edge of the wind window, a place where it will pull at a minimum and drag you upwind. Edge really hard. You want the board's edge buried deep in the water. This means you can resist all the sideways pull from the kite. If you start going too fast, push out hard with your back leg. With the board's edge so deep in the water, you'll drive the board upwind, forcing the kite to the edge of the wind window, reducing your power and regaining control. The power stance. So when you're really powered up, your stance may not look as perfect as in more moderate winds. Everything is about getting weight against the kite and channeling all the power down through your legs to bury that hillside edge. You want to sit right down and back in your harness, so your hips may not come forwards like we normally recommend, but still push your shoulders back and have your arms slightly bent as normal, with the kite sheeted in at arm's length. Don't be tempted to continually try and sheet the kite out to lose power. You'll throw off your whole stance. You still want to keep power in the kite, even when you are overpowered. Controlling it by edging. This will give you a smoother ride and you will be in control of the kite, rather than letting it pull you around. Be aggressive. Everyone will agree that kiting in completely flat water is the easiest way to progress the fastest. But unfortunately, most of us have to deal with choppy water. And then there are the days when there are waves, small or big, which can be intimidating to start with, but something that you will no doubt come to enjoy in the future. Learning to adapt your stance and technique for various conditions can be a challenge, but will definitely help to make you a better rider overall and allow you to get the most out of every session. Kiting in waves can be quite daunting, even in small waves, especially if you're not very good at jumping. The key is having speed, so you can maneuver and punch through the waves, but not too much speed so that you launch off the top. First things first, it's always easier to go over an unbroken wave. The whitewater is unstable and far harder to stay in control on, so if needs be, bear off to negotiate the whitewater and aim for the cleaner, unbroken face. If you are forced to go over whitewater, try and get your weight back against the kite and off the board. That way the board can float over the whitewater. Your kite movement will depend on the size of the wave. In smaller, less steep waves, you can keep your kite lower throughout. But in larger, steeper waves, you want to slowly bring your kite higher up into the wind window as you go up the wave. And as you come over the top, steer it back down to give you some extra power to accelerate away. This will take the weight off the board as you float over the wave, rather than getting pulled straight through it. As you approach the wave, you want to control your speed, so apply more back foot pressure and carve the board slightly upwind as you go up the wave. This should momentarily reduce your speed, stopping you from popping off the top of the wave. As you come over the top, bring your weight forwards over the board and apply some toe side pressure to bear the board off slightly and gain more speed. A general tip for your legs, which as with normal riding are your suspension, and when going over waves it's no different. Allow your legs to bend up towards your chest and roll over the waves, extending them as you come over the top. We've explained how to minimise getting airborne as you go over waves, and there'll always be times when you need to do this. But popping off the top of waves is often how kiters first experience their board leaving the water. And it's far easier than jumping using the kite for lift. It allows you to go faster through the waves and maintain a better, closer course to the wind. With less steep, smaller waves, keep your weight balanced between your feet as you come off the top, and you will land and continue your course as if you never left the water. In bigger, steeper waves, the steps are the same as earlier, but rather than bearing the board downwind, we pull our back leg under our hips to point the board downwind to land. Check out the jumping section to learn more about landing from jumps.